Hey, what's going on, everybody? VeeDotMe here. If you don't know who I am, I have a lot of hours in Dead Cells. We posted guides throughout the years, as well as full runs and showcases and stuff like that. And unfortunately, since this game has updated so much, the last time I did tier lists were quite a while ago at this point. So right now, I'm looking at Mutations, and my last Mutations vid is from 2021. That was a very, very high number of updates ago. Right now, we're up to update 3.5. However, I don't know when this will be live on consoles and mobile, so please don't ask me because I have no idea. So for this Mutations tier list, keep in mind this is still subjective. Even though I have plenty of hours, I'm sure someone out there has a differing opinion on some of this stuff. I'm also looking at my old tier list for these to try to get an idea of how I used to rate them, and then maybe some has gone up and maybe some has gone down. Either way, if that's something that you're interested in, continue to watch this video, like and subscribe so that way you get to hear about more kinds of guides and runs for Dead Cells like I am doing right now. In fact, out of all the people who watched the old tier list video, 80% are not subscribed. So if we can somehow beat that number on this video today, I'd be super happy. So just a little explanation on how we'll do these tiers. S is going to be the absolute highest. These are super usable mutations. Works in almost every circumstance, or they are so strong that it changes your build entirely. We have things in the A tier, which are some pretty decent mutations. Obviously, you can't have a full gambit of S rank stuff, but this is pretty much the next step down. We have B tier for things that can be good if you have the preference for it. I don't take these all the time, but they really aren't bad mutations at all. C for situational. These are things that I only use in very certain circumstances, and outside of that, I probably won't be using it. D tier items, I doubt you should be using it. You may find some use here and there, but for the most part, you're better off with something else. And then of course we have our F tier, which needs no explanation. Don't use these things unless you have some kind of meme in mind. Either way, let's get right into it. We're gonna start off with the very first mutation in the Brutality tree and go through each one like by color. So the first one listed here, Killer Instinct. This is melee kills reduce the cooldowns of your skills. Starts off at 0.4. I believe this one goes up to a cap of 2 seconds for cooldown reduction. It's actually really good. I do like this. I think I'm gonna put this in the B tier. It's not quite A territory because it doesn't really work on bosses. And for the most part, the skills for Brutality aren't like the longest skills in the game. Think things like Lacerating Aura, Knife Dance, Telluric Shock, all are not super short, but not the longest skills in the game. So any kind of reduction on them is really great. But then when you combine it with things like Phaser and Grapple Hook, that's where you end up having like instant recast on those skills in the biome, and I think that's actually really worth it. However, if you need cooldowns for bosses and you have crit rate, then you should probably use Instinct of the Master of Arms, which we'll be calling Instincto for the rest of this video. Next mutation is Combo. This one got changed from its original design. It now gives you almost like a Devil May Cry combo system, where every single hit that you do from a melee attack gives you a stacking damage bonus that wears off after a few seconds. This one I'm actually going to put into the A tier. I don't always take it because not every weapon can actually attack that fast, and it is melee only. However, melee does come in the form of Phaser and the spinny weapon from the spoiler boss. So it's not only weapons themselves, but there are a couple of skills it works with. The 2.5 seconds is fairly quick, so there's not a lot of circumstances where I get to carry it throughout an entire run. But I would say that on bosses, I can usually maintain the combo for it to be worth actually using. Next, we have Vengeance. Increases the damage you deal for 8 seconds and reduces the damage you take for 3 seconds. Only after you take a hit. This one is a little tough for me to measure because if you have Base Flask, an item that actually damages you for basically free, and if you combine that with Instincto, it's easily an S rank. If you don't have that, let's say you're starting off the game, it's really a starter mutation, you're fighting Concierge, you get hit, not on purpose, you still get damage bonuses. And then if you're a speedrunner, you might take it just to hold down the shield, take a free hit, and now you're doing extra damage to a boss. I think for that reason alone, it's in the S tier. It's not exactly build defining except for in the case of Face Flask, but for the most part, for every single build in the game, this thing actually does do something for you. I actually get questions about like tips for new players, and I really think just taking Vengeance is a tip for a new player. You should just be using it almost all the time. Next up, we have Melee Mutation, yet another one that has changed from its original release. This one I'm gonna put into the S tier. I often find myself just forcing melee to work. There are slow weapons in the game. For the most part, every Brutality weapon can utilize Melee Mutation. In some cases, Melee makes stuff just work, where it probably shouldn't. It does have a secret synergy with launching a grenade that counts as a melee attack and does that extra slow. They also change slow so that if you reach a certain amount of slow stacks, monsters are actually frozen. So something like Hayabusa Gauntlets, combined with launching a grenade on your attack, even combined with Phaser, which will also proc melee, all stacks together and you'll often freeze monsters without even thinking you have freeze in the kit. Next up, we have Open Wounds. Melee attacks trigger a bleeding effect. It is actually really good. The bleed itself isn't very strong compared to like a 5 BC weapon, but what it does do is it enables your bleeding damage on your weapon, or if you're using a weapon that has bleeding built in, all of a sudden you have a very easy way to get those bleed procs. I think I'm gonna just have it in the B tier right now. Every once in a while, when I get the chance to run Open Wounds, I'm choosing between that and melee and combo. And thinking about biome monsters, I would rather have melee and combo like set in stone, and then Open Wounds comes in on top of that as icing on the cake. For bosses, obviously getting the extra damage makes sense, but I would still probably have combo on that boss, and I might even still have melee mutation for that boss too. So just for order of operations, I think it has to go in the B tier. Tainted Flask. This one is pretty much the same as it has been, except for one change. It now adds an additional elite to spawn in the biome. What this does is that once you kill a certain number of elites, I believe the minimum is 4 at very high levels of brutality, you get 1 charge of your health flask back. So they also change it where it doesn't have to be a completely empty health flask. That makes it much, much better than it used to be. I, however, rarely use this for its damage bonus component, so I will be putting this in the C tier. Now don't get me wrong, having additional health flasks at any time is pretty good. Having sort of a damage buff in a boss fight, like at the very start of it, not that bad either. But order of operations here, I would probably take Vengeance over this. I would probably take Combo over this. And then, like, to put it in the B tier, I think it's more situational than that. Adrenaline. Melee attacks restore HP depending on the damage you dealt after dodging an attack. Healing in Dead Cells is really finicky. Oftentimes it doesn't work very well, and sometimes it works too well. I believe Adrenaline is in the camp of it doesn't work well enough. It does require a weapon to deal a certain amount of damage, so it scales off the damage of your weapon. Bigger, slower weapons get more incentive, but most of those are in survival. I think this is in the D tier. If I was going to need healing, I think I would rather take Tainted Flask. That way I can just get a whole new health flask and doesn't require me to have a specific weapon. Frenzy is the other healing mutation. This one gives you healing on every attack, so long as you have an active speed buff. You would say that that only works on biomes, but there's a couple of skills, namely brutality ones, that will give you a speed boost if you get a lucky star. I think that's still like very situational. I almost think it is worse than Adrenaline, but I have like a secret fantasy out there where somehow, someway, Frenzy heals for a significant amount. I have seen this thing heal for single digits of health. which is nothing at all. And that's very, very much an F tier, but I feel bad about having it in the F. I hope someone out there knows that this is better than F and has the data to go behind it. Scheme. Your next melee attack inflicts 200 flat damage. 200 flat damage is essentially 3 hits of a Balanced Blade without counting Balanced Blade's bonus damage. However, it unfortunately doesn't scale with like weapon level or anything of that nature. It only scales off your scrolls. So the difference between a 0 BC scheme and a 5 BC scheme is night and day, because don't forget, those monsters now have more HP. So I actually don't use scheme all that often. I'll typically pair it with Serenade because I do have to swap every now and then. Or I might pair it with Phaser, only because like that's a lot of instances of extra damage. I just don't think it's as good as combo or even melee mutation. I'm gonna have it in the C tier for now. Initiative is the same way. Your first attack of a melee weapon does 100 damage. That is about the same as 1 slice from the Balanced Blade, but it doesn't scale either. This I actually think is worse because now it only works on biome monsters and not on bosses. We're gonna put this in the F tier as a matter of fact. There are so many slots that I would dedicate to anything else than initiative. I think the dream setup is something like Bladed Tonfa or Tentacle, where you jump on top of a monster and hit it 1 time. But unfortunately, I wouldn't imagine initiative would do enough damage to make the difference between life and death for that monster. Predator. Melee kills make you invisible for 1 second. I actually don't use this mutation. That's not because it's bad, it's because I partly think it is actually too good, especially in higher difficulties. For those who don't know, monsters in 4 BC and higher teleport to you, and they will maintain their aggro throughout the entire biome. However, with something like Predator, you can break that aggro and do damage, and if you're strong enough, you'll be chaining invisibility from one monster to the next, which is actually very strong. I know it doesn't affect bosses, but you are essentially nullifying the biome in order to have a greater chance at fighting a boss. Porcupack. Rolling through an enemy does damage based on the melee weapon in your backpack. It starts off at 75%, so it actually does less than a normal hit, but it will scale into doing more damage than the weapon can originally do. For the most part, anything that the weapon should do in your main hand does actually work in the backpack. For example, Flawless will do a critical hit if you roll through an enemy in the backpack. Snake Fang will apply poison if you roll through an enemy while it's in your backpack. Even Cursed Sword will do its big critical hit from your backpack. Just be careful that it doesn't kill you because a monster hit you. These are all pretty fun ideas. Sometimes I'll take the Porcupack, but not very often. It really depends on if I have like a really interesting idea in mind. I'm gonna put this in the C tier for that. It's not bad. It does require some like game knowledge to really get the most out of it compared to just taking a different mutation. Moving into the tactic stuff, we start off with support. Support gives you extra damage when you're deployed next to a skill. Skills are not only tactic skills, it also includes the flamethrower while you're playing Brutality, the bombard while you're playing Survival. Oftentimes, I will actually take this even when I'm not running tactics because 35% damage at base value is a fairly high number. For that reason, I'm gonna put this into the A tier. Opposite of that, we have Parting Gift. Parting Gift used to be a little bit stronger because back in the day, it did colorless damage. What I mean by that is regardless of what color you were, it would do a certain amount of damage, but this still fails on the same reason that Initiative and Scheme does, where it doesn't scale off the damage you dealt, so it has a flat number that it will deal to every monster regardless of how strong the monster was that died, or how strong the range attack was that you dealt. Because of that, I will be putting it in the D tier. It's not F. And the reason why it's not F is that the bomb is strong enough to kill bats, and it's strong enough to destroy the shield from the Oven Knight. Outside of that, I really don't get much value out of Parting Gift. Tranquility, another generic mutation, gives you a 25% damage buff just for having no monsters near you. That damage distance is as close as it takes for Valmont's whip to hit an enemy. That is actually extremely close. I'm gonna put this as well in the A tier. Still not S rank because I'm not taking this and then trying to force a build out of it. I'm taking it because it supplements something that I'm already doing. I do sometimes run this on Brutality if I'm playing a whip or maybe the throwing knives. Sometimes I'll play it on support. Sometimes I'll play it on survival if I'm using something like an explosive crossbow. Ripper did get a buff. Your melee attacks cause 6 projectiles that are stuck in the enemy to fall out, each one dealing damage. It is a flat number, unfortunately, so it does still have the same issue of no scaling. However, I do think it's a little bit better than a D rank. I'll be putting it in the C rank. There are certain weapons that really enjoy having this. Things like the Shrapnel Axe are a shoo-in. You launch missiles, they get stuck in the enemy, then you just knock them out and you get extra damage for it. It's a very niche situation because there's not a lot of weapons that you would be doing that with. However, whenever you can, I actually think it does work and it's fun. Alright, next up is Ranger's Gear. If you've been following the formula, you would think that this is probably in the F tier, if not the D tier. However, this thing is kinda weird. So the way how Ranger's Gear works, you have a normal attack. I'll use Bow and Endless Quiver for this example. I do 40 damage. If I throw any skill out, I get an arrow over my head. It's not stackable, so I can't throw again and get extra damage. The next shot will do bonus damage in yellow, and that's showing what the damage of Ranger's Gear is. So I do 178. So multiple knockbow, 3 hits, all doing 21 each. If I throw my grenade and then shoot, for some reason, multiple yellow numbers showed up. But it's inconsistent. I think it requires each arrow to land. That's the difference between 580 and 231. Double damage, essentially. Another good example is something like the cards. If I get all the cards into this training dummy, I can deal somewhere around like 350 damage. However, when I get the Ranger's Gear proc, I deal 1,200 damage. It's quadruple the damage just for the Ranger's Gear on every single card. That does require some extra gameplay. Things like the heavy crossbow can do a little bit easier, but that alone is like really interesting gameplay. I can't really put it in like an S tier or something like that because you just can't rely on that for true gameplay. However, I'm willing to give it a B tier only because the weapons where that works, it's like double, triple, quadruple damage. Moving on to Barbed tips, this is something that got nerfed. It does do a little bit damage, and I believe the tick rate is slower. So I used to rate Barbed tips very highly. Back in the day, this thing was in the A tier. I don't think it's like C. I don't think it's bad. However, I will drop it ever so slightly into E tier. I will continue to use it. It's worth putting in for anything that has a lot of ammo to it, especially if you have like a dot focus build anyway, and it still works with things like Hokuto's bow and Wolf Trap. Next up, we have Point Blank. If you know me and my live streams, you know I'm using Point Blank almost every single run. Any weapon that has a range component to it, even melee weapons that do range damage, such as the Bible, I'm using Point Blank in it. It's kind of a meme at this point. However, I'm putting this thing in the S tier. If you disagree with that, feel free to leave a comment. I use it far too many times for me to not say that it is not S-worthy. And it enables certain builds that I wouldn't typically allow. Things such as Star Fury, things such as the Bible that I said earlier, all benefit from Point Blank. Next up, we have Networking. This is probably the biggest change over all the mutations going into this patch. Any enemy that is hit with a ranged attack is marked. Back in the day, that used to be an arrow has to be stuck in the enemy. Now they only have to be tagged by any ranged attack. They're marked and then they share damage with other enemies. This includes ones I just named, like the Bible. I don't, however, use it on everything that's ranged compared to point blank. So I will be putting this in the A tier. However, it does something very cool on any ranged weapon that has piercing to it, where now all of these monsters share their damage. That's also including survival builds and brutality builds. Again, the base value on this thing, 35%. I think that is a very substantial number, even if you're not playing tactics. Crow's Feet. This leaves caltrops on the ground. If a monster steps over it, they take a little bit of damage and then they're slowed for 1.5 seconds. The damage component is not something I care about at all. It's really all about that slow. I'm putting this in the C tier. However, I don't really use Crow's Feet at all. I have had a lot of viewers come in and say that they use the Crow's Feet on survival builds. Things like the Wrecking Ball, things like the Axe. They're actually dropping caltrops on the ground to prevent the monster from getting that first hit off. That's not some gameplay that I really do, but I will, respect it as a really interesting idea. So if you yourself is doing that, that's awesome. Continue to do it. And maybe, this could move up into a higher tier. Tactical Retreat, a mutation that I never use. If I were to do something with Tactical Retreat, I'd probably take caltrops instead. I think the only time this beats caltrops is on a monster that can fly. So I'm gonna put it in the F tier. A flying monster while playing tactics is usually not a threat. If it's a flying boss, like Death or Conjunctivius, you're playing tactics, I highly doubt you needed the slow to take care of it. You probably needed the slow for the tentacles on the ground, in which case you should be running Crow's Feet instead. Hunter's Instinct. Ranged kills reduce skill cooldown. This is basically the Killer Instinct equivalent. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the B tier as well. I don't really value it as much as I value Killer Instinct. However, putting this on something like an Owl, or having it in combination with Wings of the Crow. Tactics has some of the longest cooldowns in the game, and they can't self-perpetuate their own cooldowns. However, anytime you can reduce the cooldowns on those, especially in biomes, it's very well worth it, so I'll have it in the B tier. Acrobatipack. Very, very different than Porcupack. This is a build enabler. You can find some very exciting weapons in the game, in some cases legendaries, throw them in the backpack, and now all of a sudden, all those bells and whistles from that legendary are now working out of the Acrobatipack. Sometimes I won't even run a legendary until I realize, oh, I can use it with Acrobatipack. That's an S tier all day. If I had triple S, then sure, I would probably throw it in there, but as of right now, I do not. I'm also now realizing that I mistook these two, so don't worry about that too much. They're both in the S tier. Moving on to survival, we have Soldier's Resistance. This gives you upwards to 40% extra health, which is a fantastic number when you're playing survival. I think it's worth using. Anytime I play survival, I'm basically asking myself, why am I not running Soldier's Resistance? It's really if I have some very specific mutations that are mandatory for that build. I won't have it in the S tier, however, because it's not necessarily build defining, but it's definitely an A tier mutation. Berserker is something that I don't really use. I have had viewers come in and say, V, as someone who takes a lot of hits while I'm playing survival weapons, Berserker is a shoo-in. It's reducing the damage I take, it allows me to run slower things, and I understand that completely. I don't think I want to have it in the B tier, however. We're gonna put it in the C tier. If that moves up during the course of this video, then great. But as of right now, there's a couple of mutations and victim slow nearby targets that I'd rather run when I'm playing survival than running this thing. Blind Faith. Parries reduce your skill cooldowns. I believe the maximum is 4 seconds, which is a ginormous number. Survival has some of the slowest skills in the game, things like Giant Whistle. And on a boss, being able to do an extra Giant Whistle is essentially a huge jump in damage. I'm gonna put this in the A tier along with Soldier's Resistance. Not quite S tier because I don't want you all to go around trying to parry everything in the game. It's really just for bosses that are easy to parry and just for long skills like Giant Whistle. Counterattack. An attack that follows a successful parry gets extra damage. This does work with things like the Iron Staff. I still think it's probably around the initiative tier, but there's not a lot of mutations you could take for survival that give you extra damage. I'm gonna put it in the C tier for now. So I'd say go ahead and use it. It's gotta be better than a D purely from Iron Staff alone. Next we have What Doesn't Kill Me. Recover 2% of your HP from parrying an attack. I believe this goes all the way up to 6%, which is a ridiculous number if you ask me. I'm gonna put this in the S tier for now. If you're playing a shield, just one parry for 6% while playing survival is a ridiculously high number. Against bosses, I believe you get that damage back every 30 seconds or so. Every parry you do in the biome is almost a small food, and it is a small food on your second monster. Necromancy. You recover your HP from killing enemies. The higher your HP are, the less recovery you get. Essentially, this thing probably works best around the 50% mark. However, I still think it's actually very good. I'm starting to run out of survival mutation slots though. So I'm gonna put this in the A tier for now. If you're new to the game, it does give you a substantial amount of healing. If you're not new to the game, one hit is gonna be a decent amount of damage, but you can get it back fairly quickly. I think you could get it back faster with What Doesn't Kill Me. However, it's certainly more easy to just kill stuff. Next up, we have Extended Healing. This thing I use very seldomly, really only on the last boss of whatever run I'm doing. Essentially, it gives you full HP. All you need is to activate your health pot and then you will heal over a 12-second period. You technically do extra damage while you're healing, but I don't really care about that part. Really, all I worry about is activating the healing and then just fighting the boss. If I take damage, I will probably heal it back. I think that's probably C-worthy. I don't think it's good enough to be in the B tier, only because there's another mutation based on recovery that I think is better than this. Gastronomy. Healing effects are increased by 65%. If you recycle food, you get bonus damage for a whole 5 minutes. I think it's actually good. We're getting in sort of a trifecta of What Doesn't Kill Me and Necromancy, where you, the player, has to decide which one is worth taking. Now, Gastronomy works when you're not playing survival. You can be playing tactics and get a really big heal off of one piece of food. And I put a lot of value in that compared to having to kill something with Necromancy. However, again, Necromancy still very easy to use. I think I'm gonna put this in the A tier because if you need any kind of healing, 65% is a pretty big number. All you need to do is leave the food on the ground and then come back for it later and you will get a good chunk of health that you would not have had earlier. And that works on every color. Spite. This is a mutation that does damage based on reflecting a bullet. Same way for initiative and ranger's gear, it gives you really no scaling on your actual parries. But similar to ranger's gear, parry shield specifically gets an extra benefit from running this thing. So my first parry with parry shield, 73 damage multiple times, like for each bullet that comes out. If we swap over to Spite, however, parry shield suddenly does over 100 damage multiple times. So every single parry bullet gets extra damage from Spite. I think that's like interesting. However, it only ever works on this. There's no other shield in the game that gives you multiple bullets that will all benefit from Spite. If you're running Spite, like maybe there's an argument to have this thing in the C tier. However, I'm gonna put it in the D tier for now. I think you might be better off with Counterattack. Spite does help you if you do a multi-parry on something like Giant's multiple lasers. However, on other bosses, I think you get the chance to attack after doing a parry, especially if you have something like Frost Shield. Next up, we have Heart of Ice. Attacking a slowed, stunned, frozen, or rooted enemy gives you cooldown reduction, including bosses. So there's a lot of ways to CC an enemy. You have Stun Grenade, Ice Grenade, Wolf Trap, etc., etc. Slow, however, makes things a little more interesting. So a slowed enemy could be from melee mutation. A slowed enemy could be from victims slow nearby targets when using survival weapons. So there's a lot of ways to get Heart of Ice, and the cooldown reduction is pretty substantial. I think, and this one is like really difficult for me to answer, but I think this one is in the A tier. I feel like it could be an S if I had a like build that all of a sudden I know for a fact I have to run Heart of Ice with this. I'm still taking Heart of Ice to supplement the different items I've taken, but it's different than a point blank where it's like, okay, Heart of Ice is now mandatory for me to run. Next up, we have Kill Rhythm. Kill Rhythm is also a very interesting mutation, and you can see my survival stuff is really leaning towards the A ranks. Kill Rhythm works especially well on two-handed weapons, be it heavy crossbow or the tick scythe, all easy uses of Kill Rhythm. However, it also works when you're dual binding stuff. If you want to know more about dual binding, check out our Dead Cell Secrets video that we have in the description of the video. I've seen people run it with Assault Shield, I've seen people run it with Ice Bow, so I want to say for that reason it's probably S tier worthy. It's really hard to say over the course of a game, did Kill Rhythm actually make the game winnable, or was it just there to help? We don't really have a lot of data to go off of, and there's no UI that tells you if Kill Rhythm's working or not. However, just from a popularity standpoint, I think it's probably S-worthy. Finally, we have Armadillopack. This is, again, one of the most popular mutations in the game. For people who don't even like running shields, you might actually put a shield in your backpack just for Armadillopack. That S tier through and through. If we had triple S rank, it's probably a triple S. If you don't like running a shield, consider just running Armadillopack regardless of what color you are. It's just that good. Moving down to the final colors, we have our colorless items. These are all mutations that you can run on any color you want. Starting off with the first one in the game, Ygdar Orus Leox, aka YOLO. This thing I have to use when playing 21 BC, but you probably don't use it once you get out of 0 BC. It's not that it's bad, but there's other mutations that you should probably use instead in order to get stronger builds and essentially win more runs. I'm gonna have it in the D tier for now, not F, because obviously if it saved you from a death, then it is better than an F. However, you really should start to learn not to run this as soon as possible. After YOLO, we have the brand new Frostbite. This used to be survival only, now it is in colorless. There's a stacking damage that it will deal depending on how many stacks of slow are on the enemy, and then if the monster is frozen, then they take the full amount of damage. However, I personally have found no use for running Frostbite. I've had a couple of viewer builds that let me experiment with Frostbite, and even then, that makes me really believe more that it's not worth running. This is in the F tier for me. Conceptually, it's very fun, but I think from a numbers standpoint, you may as well use any other mutation in the game, even combo on a slow weapon compared to running Frostbite. Recovery. The length of time that you have to recover your HP is 3 times longer. If you don't know what that means, every time you get hit by a monster, you get a yellow HP bar, and that gives you a chance to get that HP back just by dealing damage. I really like it. I like it enough to put it in the B tier over something like Extended Heal. Some builds actually work really well with recovery. For example, Hayabusa Gauntlets, the Bible, other very fast weapons are able to get that health back faster. You can heal somewhere around like 90%, makes it very effective for your maximum health. Emergency Triage. Healing flasks only restore 35%, but their use is sped up, and it protects you with a bubble for 2 seconds. I use this exactly 1 time whenever I play Dead Cells, and that's on the final boss in 5 BC in the spoiler biome. I don't use it for Queen, I don't use it for Dracula. That's D tier for me, because I do think it's actually worth using it in specifically the spoiler fight, but outside of that, odds of me using it, near 0. Velocity, speed buff for killing enemies lasts 3 times as long. I do not use this on Swift Sword. If I'm gonna run Swift Sword, I'm just going fast in general. Has nothing to do with running this thing as a mutation. I think this thing is purely a speedrun mutation. You could say use it with get rich quick and stuff like that, but I don't think that's worth it either. If you want to maintain get rich quick, just go faster, Forehead. I know that's like not good advice, but I don't want you all to waste the mutation slot. Dead Inside. This is also changed. Now it gives you double the health, but you can no longer heal your health, you can only recover it. That means it does have synergy with the recovery mutation. However, typically when I use Dead Inside, I don't use recovery. The reason why, I'm only using this thing at the very last boss of the game. However, I use it on Dracula and Queen, so I think it's actually better than Emergency Triage. However, I really don't want you all to run this thing too much. I only use it when I run Survival, and I have like a plan to face tank the boss anyway. Alienation did get a change. Upon fully clearing a curse with at least 5 stacks, you are healed based on the amount of curse you reached. This thing has like really weird scaling to it. Sometimes I've healed at full HP, and sometimes I've healed for less. What really happens is that once you hit 5 stacks of curse, the game is counting some invisible number, and then once your curse is fully cleansed, you get all that healing. That means if you got cursed at 5, and you somehow got more curse on top of that, once you hit 0, you will get a massive burst of healing. It's a little weird though, because if you think about it, how did you take damage anyway? There's only one mutation that will let you take damage while you're cursed, and that does kinda work with that. However, I don't know if that's something that's like really reliable. So for now, I'm gonna have this in the D tier. I think for the most part, you should be using some other healing source. It's almost like it's a meme. Next up, we have Acceptance. Acceptance, I don't think has been changed at all throughout the entirety of Dead Cells. What it does is it reduces the number of curse kills required to cleanse, but now all healing you take curses you. Technically, this now synergizes with a few mutations. I don't know if you want to reduce the amount of curse you have if you run those mutations. So I think for now, Acceptance is going to be in the F tier for me. Next up, we have Masochist. Masochist is a weird mutation for me because I know people who will run Masochist on every single run in Dead Cells. It's very generic. It just reduces the damage you take from a trap. However, I believe traps do a maximum of 30% of your life. So the only time I take Masochist is if I'm going into Distillery. I'm gonna put this in the D tier for now. It's only really good in Distillery. And then outside of that, if I'm gonna take a generic thing, I'm just gonna take Gastronomy. Next up, we have Disengage. This thing did get a nerf. It now only protects you one time in a biome or a boss. If your HP drops below 15%, you get that force field. It protects you for quite a long time. You could potentially kill the boss in 5 seconds thanks to that bubble. Just keep in mind it only works that one time. I do think it's better than Emergency Triage, but I don't think it's so good that it's like higher than a C rank. No Mercy. Execute monsters under 15%. The effect is halved on bosses. This thing I value pretty highly, especially if you're using a dot-based build that's damage over time. That bleed or that poison will pop on a monster and just kill it without you having to wait that extra time. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the S tier. I don't run it all the time, not anymore, because I do value some of the other S tiers higher than this. But if I'm not running those S tiers, especially if I'm using a dot-based build or if I'm running Barbed tips, No Mercy has to be in there. Next up, we have Instinct of the Master of Arms. This Instincto gives you cooldown reduction just for doing a critical hit. Also works on skills that do critical hits, such as the Scarecrow Sickles. S rank, if I have a crit-based build, chances are I'm trying to find a way to make Instincto work with it. Even if it's a low cooldown skill like Phaser or a long cooldown skill like Giant's Whistle, I still try to find some way to do Instincto with it. Next up, we have Ammo Mutation. Ammo actually got a buff. It now works with Boomerang, it works with the Throwing Axe, all on update 3.5. Again, please don't ask me when 3.5 is live. That makes it so much better than it used to be. I used to not value this thing at all, and now I actually look for ways to incorporate ammo, but only for those specific builds. If I'm using like a marksman bow or a quick bow, I don't use ammo with that. I'm trying to find some other way to get my ammo back, such as using a skill that gives you my ammo, or parrying a boss also gives you your ammo. And now we're getting into the new stuff. If you remember my old mutations guide, these things didn't exist back then. First one is gold plating. Gold plating is a mutation I do not use except for one specific build that's in my survival top 3. And that is a very strong build. I don't think it's good enough to force that build to show up because it requires a lot of pieces. So I'm gonna put this in the C tier for now. It's not awful. However, as you go through into higher biomes, some attacks will deal so much damage to you, especially if you're not survival. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna drop it down 1 point now that I think about that. On anything but survival, this thing scales on your max HP. So if a monster deals like 100% of your max HP in one hit, you lose a crap ton of money for it. Compared to playing survival, where a hit might deal like 25% at max value, only still takes a small chunk of your money away. Get Rich Quick actually gives you a lot of gold based on your speed bonus. If you maintain the speed bonus very well, you could fund quite a bit of your run. I still don't really use it all that often, so I'm gonna put it in the C tier. I don't pair it with things like Swift Sword. I don't make the run specifically a like speedy run. It's just in circumstances where I'm poor, I will take Get Rich Quick, which is funny to think of it that way. In the same vein, we have Midas Blood. This thing gives you gold every time you get hit. I believe it does scale based off of the amount of damage you took. However, taking high amounts of damage while playing Tactics or Brutality is not to be considered normal gameplay. I would say it still fits in the same top 3 survival build. So I'm gonna put this in the C. It's like good enough that it's better than gold plating, but I don't want you all to run this thing in every single build that you have. Next up, we have Wish. Wish will make the next item you pick up into a legendary. I personally don't use this only because, like, if I make any item into a legendary, my overall run enjoyment will probably go down. I will probably win too often if I use Wish. For that reason alone, like, this one's kind of weird. I want to put this in the F tier purely based on fun factor, but there's probably like a reason to have this in the S tier. If I am so confident that I will win with this mutation, it's S worthy, but I don't want to run it because I don't want to win that easily. So if I had a meme tier, it would go there, and I kind of think F is my meme territory. We have some brand new mutations for update 3.5. Again, don't ask me when 3.5 is released because I don't know. First off, we have Cursed Flask. This thing has infinite health flask charges. However, you are cursed for 20 every time you use a health flask. In some biomes, that's not that bad. 20 enemies is like some bats, some rats, maybe a scorpion here and there. However, I understand that getting cursed is like bad. So, especially on a boss, if you have to heal yourself in a boss fight, chances are you might die in one hit. There are new mutations that go along with that to make it a lot easier. However, I cannot have this any higher than a C tier. I don't want you all to run this unless you have the next mutation I want to talk about, which is Damned Vigor. This thing is essentially Fight for Your Life from a Borderlands or something. If you take fatal damage, you have 2 seconds to get your health back. Your health is dropped down to 1, but you do get recovery. You get the chance to get some of your health back. However, if you happen to take any damage while you only have 1, you do die. I think it's slightly better than Disengage in biomes, but it is of course worse than Disengage on bosses. You'll probably toss this one around back and forth depending on like personal preference. I would rather run this specifically because it can save you from a curse compared to running Disengage, which is just for bosses. And last but not least, we have Demon Strength. Demon Strength is almost meme-worthy on its own. You deal extra damage based on having a curse. You deal 2% per curse you have. I believe it stacks up to 50 curse. That's not to say that you shouldn't go above 50 curse, because that means you're running a curse build anyway. In that case, you should have as much curse as possible. I, however, don't ever run this in a non-meme build. If you're running curse sword runs, or if you're playing the aspect damned, then you probably are running this thing, in which case, it's probably S tier. However, outside of that, it's in the F tier for me, because I'm not running it. F is more meme-worthy here, but it's like the difference between I'm playing a fun run, or I am going to die because I'm stacking a bunch of curse, I'm gonna die in one hit. So there you go. Brand new mutations, ancient old mutations, every mutation in the game listed right here. This is your tier list, at least for VeeDotMe. I stand by most of these. Some of them are like purely for fun factor. However, there's some real objective circumstances here. However, you are welcome to disagree with any. If you do, leave a comment letting me know which one you disagree with. Leave a comment with some extra synergies that I don't know about. And as I said earlier, subscribe to the channel. We do these kind of things all the time, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy your time here. Check out some of the other Dead Cells vids I have up on the screen right now. They're all bangers, certified if you ask me. Either way, hope you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you on the next one.